Hi guys, so today we're going to be putting our supply and our demand together, right? So we're going to talk about a change in supply and demand equilibrium. Our learning target for today is I can analyze changes of outside influences that impact supply or demand, prices, and quantity. So go ahead and get your notes out. We'll be working through some practice problems together, and our lesson today will focus on putting our supply and our demand graphs together and learning to read the equilibrium of both. So equilibrium is where the forces of supply and demand meet on a graph. This point is called the equilibrium, and it is documented by a QE and a PE. The QE is the quantity equilibrium, while the PE is the price equilibrium. So if we look at our graph over here, we have our supply line and our demand line. And this point right here where they meet and intersect is our equilibrium. So if we were to draw lines out, we would have our PE, which is our price equilibrium, and our QE, which is our quantity equilibrium. So if something happens to shift supply or demand, this equilibrium will change. So this graph is much more realistic when we are thinking about the economic world. We will now see how factors change the entire market for consumers, and this is based on demand, and producers, and that's based on our supply. So anytime that these lines shift, whether they increase or decrease, it's going to affect our equilibrium, and it is going to change our price and our quantity. So there are lots of things that can change equilibrium, but we're going to focus on the changes in demand and the changes in supply. So our changes in demand that can shift our equilibrium are the same that could shift our demand line. So these are changes in income, and this can cause people to spend more or less money. This is change in the number of consumers, change in taste or preference. Remember, if a celebrity were to endorse something, or if something were to become more popular, that is a change in taste. A change in future price. If our price is going to be cheaper in the future, it will affect our demand now and vice versa. A change in price of a substitute and a change in price of a complementary good. When we look at a change in supply, we're looking at input costs, we're looking at technology, we're looking at the number of producers. Remember, we had an example where we were looking at the number of people producing cars, and when that decreased, our supply decreased. So that really affects our supply in total. A change in government policy, whether that's the government helping, the government increasing taxes, this can affect our supply too. Our change in human capital, are we educating our citizens? Are we providing them the effective training to get the job done? And then a change in productivity. So when we think about our shifts of equilibrium, these are the outside forces that will cause either a change in demand or a change in supply. Now, based on this shift is how our equilibrium will change. So here's some practice problems, and things to remember is that we want to note the market first. What market are we looking at? So our practice problem here is Christmas decorations. So our market is Christmas decorations. The price of glass goes up. So when we think about this, are we looking at demand or are we looking at supply? Who does it impact first? Or is it going to impact the producers if the price of glass goes up, or is it going to produce the consumers, right? So in this instance, it's going to impact the consumers first, right? The price of glass goes up. So what curve will it shift? In which way? Will it shift our supply? Will it shift our demand? And in what way will it increase or will it decrease? And then what happens to our P's and our Q's once this shift happens? How does this have a long-term market effect for our citizens? So here it's our supply. So I was wrong. It will impact our producers soon. I'm sorry. So the price of glass goes up, our input cost goes up. So it's going to impact our supply. And it will move our price up. See where our equilibrium changed? Our price increased while our quantity decreased. Price increased, quantity decreased. So let's do a couple of these together. So in regards to the Christmas decorations market, Hobby Lobby comes out with a new llama-themed Christmas tree that all 13-year-old 13-year-old girls want. So in this instance, are we affecting the producers or are we affecting the consumers? So to think about that, who will be buying these trees, right? So the market is for 13-year-old girls. So it's going to be affecting our consumers, which means that our demand is the line that is going to shift, right? So the demand curve will shift. But which way is it going to shift? If there is suddenly an increase in the want for these llama Christmas trees, what happens to the demand for them? It'll go up, right? It'll increase because everybody wants this llama Christmas tree. So our demand is going to increase, which means that our line will shift to the right. Remember, when we're talking about line shifting, right is an increase, left is a decrease. And this is the same for our supply and demand. So why does that curve shift? Think about it. Think about the reasons that would cause our demand line to shift. In this instance, this llama-themed Christmas tree becomes popular, right? It's endorsed. Everyone wants it. So for here, it is a change in taste or preference, right? That is the reason for our shift. So what happens to our P and our Q if our line were to move to the right? What happens to P? It would increase, right? Because our equilibrium line shifts. And when our P shifts here, our Q will shift as well. So P increases as well as Q. So here's our line shift. We increased, so we moved to the right. And then from there, our equilibrium point changed and made our price increase and our quantity increase. Number 2, in regards to the Christmas decorations market, we're still looking at the same market. Ms. Keller knows in March, most Christmas decorations are 90% off at Hobby Lobby. But our current month is January. So with that in mind, which curve will shift? Are we shifting our supply? Is it affecting our producers? Or are we shifting our demand? Is it affecting our consumers? Well, in this instance, it's affecting our consumers, right? Because the decorations are going to go on sale. So here we're going to be shifting our demand line. Now, which way will it shift? Think about it. If you want to buy Christmas decorations, are you going to buy them now when they're expensive? Because we're in January. Or are you going to wait until March until they're on discount? Consumers always want to buy the cheapest product, so they're going to tend to wait until March when they go on sale. So if we're waiting till March, does the demand for the decorations now go up or does it decrease? Well, it'll decrease, right? So this will shift our D line to the left. And if our D line shifts to the left, you know that our P and our Q is going to change. So why does that curve shift? Well, if the price isn't changing now, but it's changing in the future, it'll be a change in future price that causes this line to shift to the left. So when we shift to the left, what happens to our price and our quantity? They decrease, right? So both will decrease in this instance because our D line shifted from here to here. And when it shifted, our equilibrium shifted. So when our equilibrium shifted, so did our price and our quantity. Last one before you try them on your own, in regards to the baby toy market. So now our market has changed. We're looking at baby toys. The government funds a program that pays for new developmental toys to be sent to daycares. So which curve shifts, right? So if we're looking at government policy and we're looking at a toy program, which will this affect first? Will this affect our producers or will this affect our consumers? Well, in this instance, because it's a government policy, it's going to affect our producers first, right? So our supply line here is going to shift. So which way will this shift? So if the government is providing funds that pays for new toys, are we going to have more toys or are we going to have less toys? You'd have more toys, right? So it's going to increase and shift to the right. So our line's going to shift. So why does that curve shift? It shifts because of government policy, right? Because all of a sudden the government is helping us pay for these developmental toys for our kids. So it's going to shift due to a change in government policy. Now this one's tricky. This one's different, right? So when our S line shifts, we're moving down and over. So with that in mind, our equilibrium is going to change, right? It's going to move down here. So if it moves, what happens to our price? It decreases. But what happens to our quantity? It increases, right? So here is our shift. Our supply line shifts to the right because we're increasing because our government is helping us out. And then our P and our Q changes as well. Our price will decrease while our quantity will increase. So you now have a formative assessment to complete in Google Classroom. I'd like you to go in and try and complete it. If you have questions, email me. If things seem confusing, let me know, and we can work through it together.